Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Jacqui Taylor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Flying Binary. We're a web science company focused on a mission of inclusion. And by that, I mean leave no one behind, tech-enabled change. We do that using the web science we pioneered to leverage the Internet of Things with deep tech. And firstly, apologies if you're expecting to see Rachel and Jackie double act. That's not this year, maybe another year. She's not well. So I've changed the presentation. I've created a new map. I've added a panel session, but I kept the title. So really it's just the same as you're expecting. But it is the weird session, so I thought that was actually cool. So last year at MapCamp, I spoke about how I've been expanding my web science work to challenge orthodoxy. We need to make change happen across 180 nations based on the approaches we've used as the co-founders of the data journalism industry. And this time I'm going to share some insight into the 21 years of web science research that underpins all of this and explain why it's time for our technology industry to become inclusive. First of all, I want to give you a quick overview of our company and the cloud-first sustainable approaches we use for inclusion. So over 34 million citizens have been informed the web science research that I'll share with you today. We're proud to be one of the GovTech 100 for the UK, recognition we're accredited with changing the digital future for the UK government. I've just seen a message pop up on one of my screens saying you're only just seeing my slides. So if that's the case, apologies on that one. This award-winning technology for the UK government underpins the next steps for the work I shared last year for the 17 UN agencies. All our G-Cloud services are secured and accredited. They're all interoperable. They use a new trust model, which is based on our inclusion work. And we've upgraded them from our work in Ukraine. So we've been working in Ukraine since February the 10th. And the new services are all being made available to Her Majesty's government in November. I've mentioned that as web scientists, we're co-founders of the data journalism industry. And since we started our work in Ukraine, it's displaced 15,000 people that work in their tech industry to 20 other countries. But tech has been the enabler to keep everything running and Ukraine to be able to do what it needs to do. I want to explain the term deep tech. The term comes from Swati Chaturvedi. He's the co-founder and CEO of investment firm Propel. Deep tech companies are based on substantial scientific advances, in our case, the web science we've pioneered, and high-tech engineering innovation. Both co-founders of Flying Binary are engineers. I'm an aerospace engineer, my co-founder is an electrical engineer. The thing about deep tech is it requires lengthy R&D, usually a long time to reach commercial applications, and often requires large investments to achieve commercial success. But the underlying IP of deep tech is usually well protected and it's hard for others to reproduce. And it's always given us, all as deep tech companies, a strong competitive advantage or a barrier to entry. Flying Binary is the exception on both of these counts, though. We've never taken investment in the 13 years since we founded. I'm known as the Queen of Bootstrapping, and I have mentored 3 unicorns, one on their way to a dedicorn, i.e. $1 billion valuation companies, and many hundreds of 7, 8, 9-figure companies that were all bootstrapped to start and then have gone on to take funding. And we've been, since we founded, we've been profitable from month 1, so we're using a different business model, and I'll come on to that. I pioneered 21 years of fundamental web science that is the underpinning architecture of our sustainable cloud services. So in 2001, used to saying 2020 something. In 2001, I stood down from a high-flying IT career. I've done many national infrastructure projects, changing the aerospace industry into software engineering focus, transformation in the Bank of England, the only technologies to put tech across the entire National Health Service estate. But there was a new problem that I knew I needed to solve, one that was very close to home. And that was to build a new type of technology for the classroom to be used by our son, which was why it was close to home, and other neurodiverse students to unlock their talents in the examination hall. I had no idea what I was actually setting out to do. And it was a very long journey, whole 9 years to make that happen. But when we finally got that tech into the exam hall, having dealt with all the education exam boards and the education regulator, those pupils got 2 grade uplifts at GCSE, and that then a 1 grade uplift to GCE. And what did that give them? That gave them access to tertiary education. Many of them went on to do that. Many became entrepreneurs, but they forever had that baseline. And on the 12th of March 2009, which is the 20th anniversary of Tim Berners-Lee founding the World Wide Web, I contributed my 8 years of research at the Royal Society, and essentially set us on a new journey for this web science approach. I was also part of the task force at the Royal Society replaced the computing curriculum in the UK with the computer science curriculum. That wasn't popular either. So Fine Binary, as a result of that work, was born in 2010 with that inclusion mission, because I knew the enabling capability of the tech we were building. And today, over half the world's population have been positively impacted by that work. Talked about data journalism industry. On the 29th of June 2011, we launched the data journalism industry using that web science that was so sticky across our online world. We pioneered it with Simon Rogers, who was head of the data blog at The Guardian at the time, who's now head of news at Google. And I remember as we set that cloud service live, we spoke about, will anyone care about the way we're doing this? Well, and particularly what we were showing, which was the impact on citizens across the military operations in Afghanistan. Well, 22 million people cared over the first 2 hours, and our cloud services were under siege, but we were testing our web science for the first time at scale. And on average, 34 million people still interact with those stories we share today. And it turns out when Gen Z show you, Gen Z are 29 to 19 today, show you how they use technology as a social machine, which is what that early web science was. You can share a data visualization using that science that creates an industry. And this slide I'm showing you here is our second primer for our PhD journalists, we have another book that's been done since then to share the knowledge. 7 million people are in our data journalism industry today, and I would just want to take a minute to recognise all of the team that are on the front line documenting the current atrocities in Ukraine. Thank you all. Slava Ukraini. So that's the beginning of it. And so it was all going well. We built our deep technology in the sharing economy, believing that this model was going to solve some of the world's biggest problems, but we were wrong. We were wrong on 2 counts. The first count we were wrong on is open standards, open data, open hardware. It does enable us all, but it's also enabled the same technology to be used and weaponized. And on the 13th of November 2015, after giving my first European speech and my excitement of sharing my IoT blueprint for Internet of Things blueprint in the European Commission for the first time, I was faced directly with that reality. This was the day that Paris had been attacked using the same technology that we were planning to use. And 2 days later, we pivoted Fine Binary to build the deep tech to support the next steps for the counter-terrorism domain. And we still do that work today. So we didn't have a sharing economy, we had a pseudo sharing economy. Not only was it not something that we could defend against and could be weaponized against us, the business model was a freemium business model. You don't pay for this and you get this for free. It was a for-profit model where our privacy and security were being given in exchange for free tools and platforms. And effectively, our societal approaches and our societal knowledge and direction was being compromised by that. In December 2016, I sat around, in a space in Tech City, the first virtual hub on Earth, and we discussed as founders of the digital economy in the UK what could be done about it. And quite frankly, what the founder said to me is, yeah, but this is your gig. This is industrial Internet of Things. No clue what we need. You need to work that out. And that was fair. And I founded something called the empathy economy that day, because what I was searching for was what could deliver that original vision. I sat on the 20th anniversary of the web, and what we could do to create that. And I spent the next year connecting with entrepreneurs across the world. So that was my 2017. And then we literally scaled out from there, and we built an alternative business model and commercial model to the sharing economy. Now I'm just going to, you have to bear with me here. I'm just going to share the foundational tech that we used for the empathy economy. And bear in mind, this wasn't just Gen Z where we started. When I stood up in Davos in January 2019, I explained that Gen Alpha, 18 to 8 today, are using technology in a completely different way. And our Gen Beta entrepreneurs, our youngest entrepreneur, Gen Beta are 7 and under. Our youngest Gen Beta entrepreneur is 3. They look at the world in a completely different way again. So as I share this map, please bear with me as I switch my tech, because I've used the online tool, the Wardley Mapping online tool, for the first time. I'm doing this for the first time ever live. It isn't built for visually disabled, neurodiverse people like me. And I want a huge shout out to Damien Ondor and Ben for all they're doing. I'm sorry, Ben, but Damien has 3 pages of notes on the changes to make this tool work for me. So here goes. I'm hoping that you see, bear with me. There I go. Okay, sorry about that. That tech switch didn't actually work. I'll work on that next time. So where we are, can I just ask, just bear with me, everybody. We can see your screen with the tool. Oh, do you know, Gertie, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's fantastic. That, and oh, that's fantastic. I've just had to pull the chat up. Can you just confirm to me that I've not got anything in the way for you to see this?
Nothing in the way. Nothing in the way, Jacqui.
Both sides titles. Yes, I can't get the kit. Damien, can you add another one to the list, please? I can't get the kit to disable that that side panel, so it'll just have to be. So there is a map that precedes this, but we haven't got time and I've got to be quick. So where we are is essentially everything we do in the empathy economy, because that's what replaces the sharing economy, starts in exactly the same way that you know the digital technology for the sharing economy does. No difference. Always start with user need. If we're not delivering user needs, what on earth are we actually doing? And you know, nothing against change. We've developed the best coding practice. We're looking at runtime applications. The OS is the same. We're working in a DevOps setting. We've got compute doing it. They're all products still, but we can see how they'll evolve. And in fact, I'll evolve them on this map. And then obviously what always changes and what always we utilize as commodity is the best architectural practice. So the first thing that we need to look at is user need, because it's different here. So in this situation, what matters the most is that user need is driven by a transparency need. That's absolutely critical. Gen Z and Gen Alpha, it ripples through everything they do. Gen Beta are very different, but I will talk about that another time because of time more than anything. And what they do always, in the sharing economy, we compete. It's always about, because it's profit driven, it's always about how we can compete. In the empathy economy, it's not. We don't compete, we collaborate. And so essentially, the first thing they do when they're looking at anything is looking at collaboration. And essentially, well, when they decide they need something, it's a transparency focus, and they look at how they best collaborate. Now, this has been going on since 2011. So there's all sorts of best practice and everything else that happens here. And I've tried to simplify this in a matter of time. But that matters because what they next do is use technology as a social machine, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, on a specific mission. That's the absolute key. So what's the mission? Here's what we're looking at. That's the transparency piece. We need to collaborate. Here's the mission. And the first thing they do is use whatever they're doing, they look at it in a DevOps way. That's just the way it works. And then essentially the next thing they look for is how they can share data. Now, this is not in the way that it works in the sharing economy, because they don't use open data. Mostly don't, almost never don't. Yeah, almost never don't these days. Share data between them. So this is data that isn't publicly available, but they have around the mission they're looking at. They're either creating it or they're sharing it. And the next thing they'll do is, from a collaboration point of view, they'll choose their application. Now, we tend to call this a social machine because often it is some of the free technology. And so it works in a sense of, we're going to use this technology as a social machine. Now, obviously, some of the social platforms can't be done like this, or can only be done from a paid point of view. And sometimes that's done that way, but not always. And what then tends to happen once they've got to that is actually they're looking at compute. And particularly when we've got AI and some of the other deep tech, that's very much evolving that compute into a commodity is the way it scales. So that's essentially the way they look at it. What we then have is a new style, custom built application, which is a version of this social machine. Because the tooling on this is very sophisticated, we set off with the tooling in June 2011 for the data journalism industry, and now that tooling is not publicly available, but is quite well developed. And then, of course, having done that, we'll have a new view of DevOps. Doesn't always happen, which is why I've shown the map like that. So the key things I want you to understand about what's happening, tech is a team game. I say that because we literally talk about the collaboration tools. That's the first thing we use. It's the first place we go. And then what we do is we evolve it into a social machine. Now, this originally for our data journalism industry, it's happening all the while. The one example that I didn't leak out, it was a deliberate thing, that you probably know about is the subreddit, the Wall Street subreddit that took the GameStop shorting problem on. That was something that was alive in that subreddit. Kevin started that off, but he's live in that subreddit, and that was something they cared about. And essentially that was, no hedge fund is going to short a business that we believe in, we care about. And so eventually they need to evolve their proposition, GameStop did, and the whole thing unfolded. And of course, it became national, international news at the idea that this is the way this works. So now I've got to get my way back to my other tech, and I'm not quite sure whether you've got access to my, bear with me again, sorry. I've stopped my share. I need to reshare again. So we get back to where I was. So I believe now we're back to the blank canvas for the online Wardley map. And essentially, I just want to say, where are we today with this? Tech is a team game. We have over 10 million entrepreneurs in the empathy economy in 172 countries who we've taught to be cyber safe online. The work I did with the World Economic Forum says that 52% of all cyber attacks are against SME businesses, and on average it costs them about 12,000 turnover for every attack, which takes them out of business. So we've been working on that, and the next steps is we're preparing to launch an empathy economy membership, where I'll share the Flying Binary success plan we've had at growing our business, the tech, the tools, the techniques, and I publicly committed to share this with 1 million entrepreneurs to build their profit for purpose businesses in the empathy economy. So I'm just going to take a breath on that. And essentially what I've shown you with the map I've shown you is how we've done it, and the fact that, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and latterly Gen Beta are collaborating in order to use enabling tech from a purpose-driven point of view. What does that mean? It means they're using tech to create the world they all want to live in. And many of you listening might think, well, why does that affect me? Well, that would be something the G20 said. That would be something that Europe said. It would be something that the 17 agencies I work with in the UN said. And my answer to that is, today, what I've shown you is essentially what the influence that Gen Z are having across GDP across the world. 40% of the GDP across the world is influenced in this way. So if it's something that you haven't heard of before, you haven't understood the inclusion agenda as mattering to you, I'm hoping I've changed that view today. Now I want to switch that up now and move us to a panel discussion. Thanking you for listening, looking forward to your questions. I'm going to be able to stop all my sharing so I can see questions that are coming in from you. But first of all, I want to introduce you to my panel I've talked to you about the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta entrepreneurs and what they're doing to make our world a more purposeful and impactful world. And I want to introduce you to Joanne, and she's an educator in the primary, secondary, tertiary sector. She's in Australia. She's worked in government, Catholic and independent schools. I'm not sure there's anything left there, Joanne. I think that's everything. And her PhD is on the cognitive limitations for collaboration. And obviously I've introduced you to the inclusion limitations and looking at that as an improvement strategy. And then also Domenico as well, who's the former digital wholesale specialist for Adidas. So we all love Adidas. But now he's gone into a purposeful role. I love that both of them are actually doing what they're doing with purpose. And he's the CEO of Dev Factory. They're running coding boot camps in manufacturing plants that are facing redundancy. There are many areas of our world where the industrial piece of our world is in very much decline and we don't have the skills. So those are my two panelists. And essentially what I'm going to ask them to do is take 10 minutes each to just explain to you what they see. So I've given you the entrepreneurial sort of global view. Their missions are connected to mine, what they see as part of it. Before I do need to say one thing though. All three of us are part of the ongoing research agenda with Simon Wardley. And both these panelists are part of the education research agenda, looking at where investment is needed for education. So Joanne, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how you see this setting from your perspective.
I will, and I'm just wondering, Jackie, so thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to try and share my screen. Now, Jackie is very good at the deep tech, and I said to her when I met her, my tech knowledge is not great, but I do my best. And we did talk about some interesting pieces. And I'm a teacher, at the heart of things, I'm a teacher. And one of the things that really resonated with me as you were talking was when you were talking about your son, I believe, in classrooms, and particularly in relation to exams and just the system of schooling. It is one of those things that I find fascinating because we, here in Australia particularly, we have two educational goals, and one of them is about education excellence and equity. And so my 10 minutes that I'm going to share with you tonight is one, how I came to Wardley mapping, and the fact that I see, as you were talking, it just reinforced for me this notion that diversity is a superpower. So I'm going to be basically talking you through these 4 points. I'm using the slides. So you were talking about difference in relation to being neurodiverse. So for me, when I'm in a classroom, it doesn't matter what the age, you see very different learners and different learning styles. And my style is very different to the students that I work with as well. And so as just one piece here is that visual images for me are really important because they're my cueing system for helping me work through the types of content that I'm going to be working with students. But at the same time, that mapping is so powerful. And as you were talking about the digital space, my brain was going in all different directions. So part of the slides is to keep me on track for the 10 minutes because I am very passionate about education and I could talk forever, but we won't do that because Domenico is going to also share around what we've been doing in that research project. So as I said, diversity is a superpower. It is something that I actually wholeheartedly believe, but I know that it can be problematic. And it can be problematic because we end up with silo mentality where it can go unrecognized because we don't know what we don't know. We stay with the groups of people or the tribes that are familiar to us. And what's really interesting in the work that I've been doing is particularly across schools. So I went to school, I talk about my vanilla upbringing. I had a 2-parent family. I went to the small local state school. I then went to an independent school. It was co-ed and not much different. I then went to teachers college because I wanted to work with children. And the thing that was interesting for me was I went to a Catholic teachers college, but I wasn't Catholic. And it was probably the first time that I started to see that we can build ideas around groups of people that may be slightly different to us, even though they look similar or appear the same, but they have different values, beliefs, and so people looking at me differently. I'm also left-handed, and I remember a teacher telling my parents that I wouldn't amount to much because I was left-handed. It was also a sign of the devil. Now, I have to tell you that that's because of I'm of an age where those kinds of things were said in school at that time. But the interesting thing about what I started to find in working across those different areas was, so in government schools, in independent and Catholic, was that if those people, we assumed these things about different groups of people based on what we didn't know. So what we were looking at is that silo mentality can be a construct of function as well as knowledge and experience. And it is bounded by also the experience of the leaders who we are working with. And silos can be created in the image of that leader, which is very interesting, particularly for schools. So I'm interested to see what that might look like, or you might, if that resonates for you in your industries. And the other part that came through was this, because we had people who were, the type of work that I was working with was that I work with teachers, alongside teachers, but I also work alongside leaders, classroom middle leaders, and in universities. And sometimes I would hear them say things like, they just don't understand. It's been a long time since they've done that type of work. So they're giving us things that don't relate to us anymore. They don't understand. And so what I coined it as, that there was this, because I've done the work before in my past, then my imagined past reality was actually rubbing up against with an imagined current reality. So what we found too was that organizational structures can contribute to silo mentality, as well as the size of the organization. So the larger the organization, there can be more silos, because the groups tend to cling together because of the difficulty to actually reach across, which was an interesting piece for me, because of, we know that in schools particularly, collaboration has been an agenda for us to basically break out of a very isolated way of working. Now, the interesting thing is that I've talked to you about, silo diversity being a superpower, and that silo, it basically works against this silo mentality. So we need to cross boundaries, and particularly cross disciplines or different organizational structures. However, there's this tension that we have, because our brain, and I'm very interested in the way that the brain works. One, because I'm a teacher, and even though, and I wholeheartedly see that teaching is a whole body experience. It is not just above here, it is a whole body experience. What has shaped it was that my father, so I'm 59, my father is 89, and he had a cerebral hemorrhage when he was 42. And at the time, we didn't know much about that. And so I became very interested in the brain, particularly today. You wouldn't recognize, you wouldn't realize that he had that. But the thing is that the brain is built for survival. And so difference is seen as a threat. So diversity, or varying, anything that is different to us, can be seen as a threat. And so we go into that protective mode, which means that it is really important for those skills to be developed around collaborating, and also recognizing that fear is a natural part, but it shouldn't be the barrier that stops us from moving forward, and being able to actually acknowledge how we go about developing those skills. I know that we use the term soft skills, and I think for me that's a bane of that's a bane for me. It really grates on me, because I interpret that as soft skills are seen as less rather than gender. And I have a minute to go, so I'm going to keep.
You have. I gave you 2-minute warning. You're out of time. So
okay, I'm going to stop then. I will.
Okay.
I will wrap it up. So we're talking about the notion of digital poverty, and I actually see it as the digital divide, particularly through the pandemic. And that came to us for these educational infrastructure issues. And we know that collaboration is really important, but we also need to actually acknowledge the cognitive demands of sociality. And that actually is the number of relationships that we balance across that to influence that time, attention, and effort. And lastly, for me, Wardley mapping is an opportunity for us to look at this industrial model of education, and how might that be challenged. So I'm going to stop there, and sorry for going over time, but as I told you, I can get very passionate. So I'm going to pause now. You're not seeing, or are you?
No, that's all good. We're back, and thank you for that, Joanne. I really do appreciate that. And I think that it resonated with me with the conversation I had with he's a Python programmer. He's 6, but he's being tortured in school at the moment. So I'm doing some mentoring there. And he said, when will teachers learn I'm not a sausage and I don't want to be in a machine? So that last slide just resonated so much with me, because actually he lives in a little village down in just outside of Brighton. And one of his friends, who thinks William is amazing, is a local butcher, and he's been in to see sausages made. And he goes, that's just like school. That's what they think I am. And it's like, yeah. So I think Gen Beta are voting for you, Joanne, in terms of what you can do. And Domenico, I'd love you to follow that now. I know we don't have time to go over the education maps, because it's a whole exercise been going on since February. I'm actually in the energy research, but I know that where you're at the sort of 4 key areas for investment, because what this is about is pretty much everything needs to be changed. I think between me and Joanne, we've already got there. But obviously we can't change everything. We've got to create focus. So the education research is looking at where's the investment needed? Where do we change this? So you have 10 minutes, Domenico. Give us that answer, because we all need to know that one.
All right, let's go. Let's roll. First of all, it's a pleasure, as always, to be involved in the works of the Worldly Mapping community. If you are out there and you're thinking about, hey, this is a cool stuff going on, and you're in doubt whether to join or not, my advice is join. Okay, join, absolutely join. It's a wonderful community, amazing people, and it's just great. Now, you guys, Jacqui, Joanne, is so much. It has been inspiring to hearing you guys. I want to take. We've talked so far as in these terms. We are using diversity as a tool. Hey, we have been told that this is a limitation, and what Joanne and Jacqui, in some aspects, are promoting, is the fact that improving access, improving the way we deal with diversity is actually a superpower, right? And I will take this statement a little bit further, and I will say now that it's a necessity. It's not only a superpower, not only is good, but is likely to be our necessary future, in particular for education. Let me just, on this note, share my screen real quick. All right. I hope that you can see it. And yeah, so we are living big transition. Okay, amazing scientist Václav Smil. He reminds us that we are a very particular time in human history, because the promises of the big transition that we have faced so far, they come to a point that they are promising a lot of very cool things like singularity, cool, and on the other hand, very bad things like catastrophic climate change and all the like. So my purpose after switching from a corporate job to a social entrepreneurial job was to understand and to take a little bit of time to understand the transition. And my focus was on the demographic transition. Why, among all of the big transition, I think the most overlooked, the kind of inevitable and the unprecedented feature of this transition are super, super interesting. And well, actually, it has a lot of consequences on our society, much more than we realize. Okay, and as I already said, it's really much overlooked. It is for the time being a model that is holding almost in any population that we are observing. And most of all, it is unprecedented. We have no past example of populations reaching these stages in the human history. So, hey, we are living it. We are lucky. This is what we are living. We are at stage 4 in some countries already. I happen to live in one of those countries, which is Italy. We are in stage 4 also in places like Japan, and we are approaching that in places like Spain. And what happens in stage 4? We are about to see. We have low fertility rates. We have low death rates, of course, and we have a situation where the overall number of the population start to reach a plateau. And of course, we have one big consequence for our society, which is the dependency ratio. All right. So, what is the dependency ratio? Is just the ratio between the people that are considered theoretically active workers on the total population. And this is the example for made by using the UN projections, the UN demographic projections. And as you can see, in Italy, we come from 37 million potential working age population. In 2040, we lose about 6 million people in terms of total workforce. It's something huge. 6 million people, just to give you an idea of scale, is the size of the total working age population of Belgium. So we are losing a Belgium in Italy in 20 years. So it's huge. And this combined with the needs for the economic system to perform, give us what? The productivity imperative. This is what I call it. So we have to make more with less. We have no choice there. We have to we have to be more efficient in using human capital. Simple as that. And this is, and also this is just saying that productivity will be the answer. Well, it might be, maybe, we don't know. So far, what happened? The total productivity factor for in places like Italy has dropped in contribution of the growth in GDP, and it hasn't barely changed during the time of the ICT revolution. And this is also another huge thing that we have to think about. So the purpose of my purpose and the purpose of that factory is basically that one of nudging workers into tech. Why nudging? Because you won't expect that the people that need to jump into a new career the most, you cannot expect this population to just go out there and just jump into tech spontaneously. It just won't happen. We are humans. We are in a situation where our job, our family are on the line. We cannot take such risky decision in our minds, okay? And this is absolutely normal. It's rational to do to be like this. So a nudge is needed, and providing that nudge is what the Dev Factory does. We bring the technology education literally where it matters the most. Okay, so we are like dropping we are dropping education in the places most critical. So just to be super quick, we showing what we do in a map. We just let's make an example that business needs an application, of course, and application needs, of course, someone to write them, and these are developers. These developers have to be recruited and selected, and they do so once they have a track record for a project, so a good project portfolio that they have to custom build them for themselves, and also they need certifications and they need competence. Okay, the track record can only come from real projects, and the education, of course, is the one that is providing competence and the ability to run the certifications. So In the research group, what we have done is just to unzip the education, okay? And when we unzip it, it looks something like this. A very complicated map. It's not a system, an easy system diagram that you convert easily on worldly maps. It's a more difficult to define map with many components, many pipelines, and also at this level there is a lot going on under the hood. So in this map, we have identified some areas that I want to talk about, and I will just visually represent them to you in the map. So first thing, I will draw, I want to highlight how the work in the research and the work that Joanne is doing. Okay, I need to wrap it up. So as a wrap up, the areas, the most interesting areas in this education map are the following. So we have education and learning that's supporting the whole system down. Then we have apprenticeships, and that has to be tailored, created for a given population. And this is the work that, partially the work that the factory is doing. And then also we have an area, which is this middle area in here, that that is all about creating new content, and that it's becoming ever more easy because of the rise of open content. And of course, we have the we must have, in order to industrialize the whole system, we must push into these big switches. How we think about the diversity, how we think about access, how we think about infrastructure. These are all supporting conditions. And also to let the map speak for itself, there are two interesting areas that one might not want to see, but are really there. The map tells us they are there. So what happens when competence becomes something like human cloud? What happens when learning becomes a commodity? And what if we can plug courses directly in our brain? So these are the questions that the map poses. One of the questions that the map poses to us. I hope I was synthetic enough to represent the areas of investment. And on that note, I will leave it to you, Jacqui.
Thank you, Domenico. Thank you both, actually. So I know that you've got a couple of questions for me. I've been encouraging our audience to raise questions. It's lovely that we've got some other educators in here as well. And I think one way or another, we're all educators on this one because we all see the problem. So we do welcome any questions from you all. But I think the thing that I want to ask you, Joanne, is, I'm coming from Gen Alpha, who are just about to hit the university stage now. And quite frankly, eminent professors have spent the last 2 years in pandemic getting other careers because they're not going to be here for this cohort because they just can't, they couldn't cope with Gen Z, and they know this lot are a different lot and they're very, very different. Tech is at their core. So one of the things I'm wondering about is culture in education, because one of the things that we do in our work with our entrepreneurs is we don't teach them anything. In fact, I learn more from them than I think I ever teach them. But what we do is facilitate. So we're equipping primary school children not to be tortured by Scratch, their words, not mine, but actually go into primary school as Python programmers. They're using the Raspberry Pi from a hardware point of view. They're learning the hardware, the coding skills, and they're solving real problems that matter to them. I mentioned George earlier. He's a blue entrepreneur. He cares about the oceans. He's doing that. James, he's a gamer and he wants to be able to make an inclusive approach to that. So I'm wondering about what your thoughts are in terms of collaboration is key, and everything you've said is key, is about the culture of the way our classrooms in whatever arena, primary, secondary or tertiary, need to change from a culture point of view.
Yeah, good question, Jacqui. I think the interesting thing for me is the gap between policy, practice and the system, because the policies are there. There is the willingness in the practice, but the system, and when you talk about data, I start to twitch, because that has been a drowning, a factor. So having been in schools for such a long time and watching this evolution of, I welcome it, but it has added a number of layers where we are, so the culture needs to change in the way we work. And part of that imagining is for those people who have not experienced that type of work. They're imagining what it is, and I think that's a gap, and we need to work on empathy, but also realistic. What is the time that is needed to be able to invest in them being able to develop those skills in ways that are authentic rather than rushing,
Yeah, and I see that. And I think one of the things that we've done at Flying Binary is we've actually seen this as a journey that any of our facilitators need to take, and the school system doesn't allow for that to happen. So we've done it on a Saturday morning, because quite frankly, you have the problem sat in front of you who will not take no for an answer and will know more about it than you do. And so we found that actually, working. So my 5-year-old great niece has reorganized her classroom timetable to make 2 hours free, with the blessing of her teachers and the complete, by her headmistress, from a point of view of, we need to create time. They've effectively said, this is where we're wasting time, so can we have this time to do that?
Absolutely.
Because they're tired after school when they're
Absolutely.
in primary, and they don't want to do it then. And so they've put, some of the work has gone into the after school club, like homework club is what it's become, because they want to know this, but it's benefited the teachers. So I think that there is a movement to go on that possibly the school system can't orchestrate. And I sort of want to roll this into a question that we've had from Gertie. Really good to have your interaction here, Gertie, and she's an educator too. And I want to bring you in on that one, Domenico, because this is exactly what you're doing. How can we nudge young people to dig deeper in the effort to learn coding and more? So how, that nudge you're talking about, how can we do that? What does that look like?
Well, my expertise is on adults, okay? But I think it's exactly the same for every age brackets. I mean, just look around you. We are living in a society embedded with technology, with values embedded into it. Okay, so it's a call for a standpoint. On which side of this thing you want to be? You want to be the one who is able to understand how the machine works, who is able to understand why some tweets are popping up, how can I be, what is at stake when I'm using these tools, okay? Or you can have a proactive approach to it. It can be an active relation with technology, or it can be a passive one, okay? You can be a sausage in this sense, okay? Yes. Don't be a sausage. That's my take. And for an older adult, it would be so it works many times. Works this sort of line. Well, many people working in plants. They complain about their job being more and more standardized. Okay, so that we have the artisans. Okay, in this world there are no artisans. Well, that's partially true because the artisans are now behind a laptop in our societies for the most part. Yeah. And aspects of this, yes.
And Domenico, I want to come in on that because I feel I need to represent Gen Alpha. They're not in this conversation today, and they would say, not completely true, Domenico. I get what you're saying. Maybe that's what adults want, what millennials want, what Gen Y want, but that's not us. That's not what we want. And I'll give you an example because that's much easier. I've been called into secondary schools in the UK to talk to So I'm very passionate about the female agenda in tech and getting that diversity of thought and removing the bias and the monoculture with a male-dominated industry. And there were cohorts of young people not choosing to go forward with maths. And so I came in and I said to them, this is what I do. And I described the data journalism industry. I described how the aid agenda for the African content was changed by stories we told, how we told President Obama he was doing the wrong thing and he stopped. And they were like, oh, wow. And I showed them the stories and, 50 million people agree with this. The president of Nicaragua got very upset and the German chancellor shouted at me again, and things like that. And they're like, I want to do what she does. What is that? And I said, it can be tech. We have journalists, obviously, who are engineers, and we have Catholic priests and quantum physicists and what have you, who pull all this together. But this is about understanding what matters to you, matters to someone somewhere in the world, and telling stories with data, but actually being good at the English. I'm dyslexic, so that's a challenge for me. But also, if you want to have people that create those sorts of stories and you are the editor, I made them editors in our newsroom for a day and they loved it. And they're like, I want to do this. So then obviously the teaching staff had a whole host of young women who wanted to do maths that they needed to upskill to get there. But I think it's a lot to do with the way we present this. This
Absolutely.
is about, as the empathy economy is about impact, it's about creating the change for the world we want to live in. How do we portray what we're doing to our young people, to our young adults, to anybody who's looking to join in on this amazing journey enabled by tech? How we tell them about it is really key. So obviously that secondary school's still having problems filling the slots in the maths class because there's loads of them, and I've done that many times since. And I found that if young people at 13, before they start to be told to focus in on a set of things, actually have that sort of intervention, they'll go in much more aware of what they need to do in order to open that future, and then just get out of their way. That's because teachers say to me, is there any other advice? I said, yeah, just get out of their way, because they're like steamrollers, they'll just run you over. And Gen Beta, we haven't seen them in school yet, but yeah, they're a different kettle of fish. So I think one wanted to sort of wrap this up now. I think we've just got 2 minutes left. So I'm quite famous in Tech City. I have a magic wand somebody waved for me. Somebody made for me, and I wave that magic wand. I do it at G20, I do it in the UN, and I say, if I could give you one wish, what would that wish be to move this world we've talked about today? Because tech, it's a team game, which means it's all of us. So Joanne, very quickly, one sentence, what would you ask me for? What would you change right now if you could have one thing?
An understanding of the type of work that is being done in schools that is different to what it was even 5 years ago. Okay. And how tech enables that, but also proves problematic at times.
Okay, that's a good answer. Domenico, what would your one thing you'd want from me be?
Crazy, I got the same answer as Joanne. It's embarrassing. It has to be the new practices that are emerging. Our understanding of learning is becoming, thanks to the work of people like Joanne, it's becoming better and better. This is generating better teaching practices. We should we should give more space to these teaching practices, time and space to experiment, venture capital into these sort of projects. I think it will be key for any society which aims at improving the whole education system, because the data it tells us stagnant situation in the West, at least.
Another great answer, and I think builds on what Joanne said. And I think for me, my final thought is the way we're approaching this isn't working. I mean, I work with venture capitalists, Series C through Series H investors, 100 million investments plus, and adding money will make it worse, I guarantee you. So actually what needs to happen is we need to take a pause, whatever that looks like, and we need to convene the stakeholders, because the key stakeholders that know what they need are the ones that have just been tortured by this system and they're still thriving. And so actually, you know, I feel I represented them today, but I feel I represent that. They tell me I know what that looks like. So when I walked into the Royal Society to get rid of the computing curriculum, I walked in with the words, I'm here to get rid of the computing curriculum. And every head teacher in the room was horrified. But I had my evidence as to why it needed to be removed. So I think I would ask for that clarity about what we're trying to do. If we want it replaced, if we want it to serve us, if we want our society to thrive, we need to be clear about what we're changing it to. And my answer is, what's the purpose for our education system?
Absolutely.
The one we had,
great question.
you know, which is in empathy economy, is about that profit, but for purpose. What we've not got is the new purpose for education. So I see we're about a minute over time, I think. I just want to thank you both for your contribution today.
Thank you.
Healthy debate. I want to thank folks that have listened today. Most of you have been with us the whole time. I hope that's food for thought. And really, you know, do what you can, keep the debate going, and any questions for us, catch us all on Twitter. Thanks all. Delight to meet you all today.